There's a certain scenario here. Denmark asks for flexibility once upon a time, and now we see everything is fragmentating. There is a risk of Brexit. There is a risk of even Eurozone Parliament. How can we maintain the unity in the European Union with all that kind of flexibility around?
Okay, does it work, or have I shut it? Yeah. Thank you very much. Allow me first to congratulate you with this wonderful conference. I think it's a fantastic thing that we can get people up in the morning on a Saturday. Yes, I think it's a very, very interesting issue, and I entirely agree with Mr. Piris that Denmark was actually giving birth to flexibility in Europe in many ways. I think Skytte and Lammers, they wrote this book in 1994 saying that Denmark simply made it unavoidable that Europe would be more flexible. And that we could not eternally from now on build a Europe on unity. That Denmark did not want to say yes to the Maastricht Treaty, and they wanted permanent opt-outs, at least permanent in the sense that the EU could not force a change to these opt-outs. It had to be Denmark itself. And this was sort of the important breaking point, according to Skytte and Lammers, that Denmark, not like anyone else in the European Union, who had to, at some point at least, accept to go along with the others, this was accepted that Denmark could decide for itself whether and if we wanted to go along. And this was kind of, in my opinion, a very, very determining point in the European integration history. And how can you imagine now, to get to your question, a Europe that is so differentiated? Actually, I think that like Jean-Claude Piris, I think that it's unavoidable, and that what we will see is a Europe that will more and more concentrate on the Eurozone, around the Eurozone. And the Eurozone will of course not be closed to others, but it's sort of the club of the willing. And that is exactly what differentiates Denmark, Sweden, UK from the rest of the European Union. That you have a club of the willing who wants Europe, and then you have the incredibly reluctant Europeans who have one leg in and one leg out. And I don't think Denmark will ever leave the European Union, but I think that the Eurozone will be consolidating in the next 10-15 years, and that Denmark and Sweden will sort of go more and more in the direction of the periphery, having to abide by all union law, like Norway and UK if it's outside the European Union. So we'll become a copy-paste democracy, just like Norway is. We will not leave, we will formally be in, but we will have to follow more or less the same rules.
Copy-paste democracy,
yes.
That's a funny
Yeah. So the ones leading the Union will be the Eurozone. Those designing new propositions, designing the future will be the Eurozone, and Denmark and Sweden. I have my doubts that the UK will still be in 15 years, but we will still have to play by the same rules, and that simply means that we will have to copy-paste what's going on without having very much influence, unfortunately.
Poul, you have some influence in this kind of flexibility maneuvering inside the core. Do you feel guilty?
Partly, but I did it together with Jean-Claude, so. But I would maybe start out by saying that on some points I do not completely share this vision that we will see a Europe in several speed or a great diversified Europe. One reason why I don't believe in this is partly a few observations on what has happened. Jean-Claude rightly said that we obtained in the Single European Act this environmental clause that allowed us to maintain higher norms if ever harmonization would lead to lowering the norms. Since 1986, when that was obtained, we have passed hundreds, if not thousands, of norms. This environmental clause, which we fought for with our blood, both in Nice and later on. I remember Poul Rasmussen keeping up the European Council all night in Amsterdam to reinforce this clause, has been used possibly less than a dozen times. Same goes for reinforced cooperation. As Jean-Claude said, it has been used in two examples. One on the patent, and the reason was a linguistic problem. The Italians and the Spaniards could not accept that all papers should not be translated into Spanish and to Italian. And there's the divorce case, and I have the same doubt as you have on the financial transaction tax. So even with these possibilities, you haven't seen a rush towards a reinforced cooperation. I also believe that one of the reasons which is often given for this need for greater diversity is that we have become 28 instead of 6 or 9 or 15 as we have been. And there is often an element, at least in the discussion in the Brussels bubble, that it was so nice when we were few. And we could agree on things easily between us. But friends, Europe's present problems are not problems created by enlargement, particularly not by the last enlargement. You have had one of the most dynamic economic developments in the new member states, Poland being the only country where you have had continuous economic growth during the economic crisis. You have in the Central and Eastern European countries some of the most flexible economies. Look how the Baltic states have been able to cope and adapt their economies. Flexibility, which I think a lot of Euro members really should learn from. So again, the fact that we have become more diversified does not mean that we need a greater, in legal terms, a greater diversification. For instance, I don't think that, let's say that we would make a greater diversification on energy and climate. But if we did so, we would forever lose the possibility of finally getting the Eastern and Central European countries on board on a climate and energy package, and thereby promoting EU integration.
I love this idea that you have this enlargement was not really, has not created the problems,
No.
but you're disagreeing a bit with Jean-Claude.
Yes,
maybe I'd like to have Jean-Claude coming in here.
But maybe if I could just add one thing.
Okay.
There, where I get close to Jean-Claude, is that we have a UK problem. And the solution to the UK problems will create problems, in particular for those member states, and they include Denmark, that, for instance, that for the moment sits on the fence.
Jean-Claude, there is some disagreement here on the case of enlargement. Did it cause problems, or was it really something, a helping hand for older member states like France and others to see relief and flexibility?
Well, enlargement was an historic and political necessity. So we are not going to go backwards. But I remember writing 10 years before, because we knew 10 years before that we were preparing that that we had to take decisions in order to adapt the institutions. We have kept the same rules for a club of 6 homogeneous countries for 28 non-homogeneous. That's a mistake, and that I maintain that the institutions are not working in an optimal way. So that's a difference we have, maybe. No. The second thing is psychologically and the narrative, like Connie said this morning. We have not explained enough to the people the enlargement and the former. But all this has to be explained to people, to the young people and so on and so forth. When you have a club of 6 that everybody knows the names of the member states belonging to, ask in the streets the names of the 28 members, they don't know. So it has created psychological problems. Of course, we should not change that. And of course, it's not the fault of the new member states. It's the fault of the old member states. Okay. Now, on the other thing, on the flexibility and so on, I agree that enhanced cooperations and so on is not, no, the only real things is Eurozone. And there is a big difference there, because this is a vital, I insist, vital issue for Eurozone members. It's their life, which is, they have now taken away, which there is no going backwards. It's impossible. And it is, if it is vital for them to take some decisions, to consolidate, to strengthen the Eurozone, they will take it. They will not hesitate because it will create problems for this and that. And thirdly, for Denmark, finally, Denmark has to make choices at the end. Because Denmark has always been different. Don't put Denmark in the same bag as the UK and Sweden for me. Denmark is much more open to European Union, to ideal, and so on and so forth. But they have to choose. They have to choose. And if, unfortunately, what I will struggle against, UK is leaving, because it will be a catastrophe for the UK, but it will not be good for the European Union. Both of them will survive, but it will be a bad thing. But it will be a cauchemar, a nightmare for Denmark.
Do you think it will be a nightmare for Denmark, Marlene?
Yes.
The Brits leaving?
Yes, I actually agree completely, because we have, since we entered the European Union in 1973, we have been able to hide behind the Brits. And the Brits have been fighting the fights for us. We pretty much agree with the Brits about, just to give an example, we wanted an enlargement, mainly, now I know you'll hate me for that, but mainly because that we hoped it would slow the integration process. That was exactly the agenda of the Brits, right? Yeah, I know, but I mean, there has been so many issue areas where Denmark have agreed with the Brits, and we've had the Brits to take the fight for us.
If the Brits just stay out, we could step up.
No, because we are, and I agree with you that Danes are more open, but I think it's mainly the diplomacy. The civil servants are much more European than the rest of the Danish population. I think you like that. But I think that Denmark has really, are really going to be a difficult situation, because all of a sudden we'll be completely alone. We will not have anyone to fight for us. We will have to make the decision. Do we want to be in the core? Do we want to go along? Or do we want to slide out in the periphery, like I described before, being more and more like a country which is certainly not leaving, but is, I think, close to becoming more and more like a Norwegian situation, where we just have to do whatever's on the table. And yes, I also think you're right in your argument that for the Eurozone, this is an existential survival issue. It's not about wanting to dump everyone else. It's about, now we have set out an economic union, and we have to make it work. And that may take more integration for the Eurozone, and that's just really, really bad for us.
Paul, she was very smart, trying to please you and then to criticize you. Where is the major disagreement here?
No, but I think I actually agree with a number of things which you just said. As I also said a moment before, I think the situation of the United Kingdom takes us out of our comfort zone.
Yeah.
We have seen, and we have seen it most recently when we have been negotiating, for instance, the banking union, that there has been a willingness to find adequate solutions on the banking union for the non-Euro member states. I think if either the UK leaves, or even if they hang on with their fingers, but also in practical terms, become more and more distant, it will become increasingly difficult to obtain these in-between solutions, and we would be forced to make choices which we have not been forced to make today. And I do think that we will see a division in the coming years. The division will not be between Euro member states and non-Euro member states. The division will be between Euro states plus what we could call pre-ins, those who have a real ambition to enter into the European Union, and those who definitively have said no. And it would be extremely important for Denmark to indicate in various ways that we are pre-ins and not outs. And that's why, for instance, I think banking union is essential, and it is not just about whether or not we are going to risk paying for banks in Spain and Portugal. There's a fundamental political issue involved.
Marlene said she was agreeing. So I want somebody to have an answer, possibility to raise an answer to some of the people up here. Anyone want to put forward a question? Yes.
Thank you. My name is Stefan Inkus. My question is perhaps a little bit that of a drowning man trying to reach for branches. Considering my country, one of those who may be left in the water as the Eurozone consolidates. And the branch I'm reaching for is the interface between the Eurozone and what goes on in its immediate vicinity. One of the issues that the Eurozone is struggling with is the issue of structural reform and how to make it effective. Structural reform goes on in the European semester, which is something which includes and goes beyond the Eurozone. Is there any ideas on how this interface between the Eurozone and what goes on in its immediate vicinity could be organized also in terms of the democratic legitimacy that Jean-Claude Piris described as having to be organized for the Eurozone itself?
Okay, Jean-Claude?
Yeah, I think that as Paul Skytte said, there are not only the in the Eurozone, but the pre-ins. And you have to take into account these pre-ins. And it's why I think that if the Eurozone is doing things which are going to strengthen, and they are going to discuss together matters and to take decisions on the basis of intergovernmental agreements or something like that, they must take with them, must first of all have a complete transparency about their activities for the pre-ins or for the outs. And secondly, they must, I think, invite the pre-ins to come to their meetings when these pre-ins are in a situation where the joining the euro is not too far. And maybe I would even go so far as if their joining the euro is soon and under certain conditions to participate even in the decision making on some things. Because of course, let's imagine that Poland, for example, it's at 1 year to become a member of of the Eurozone. We are not going to take decisions binding for the decades to come without Poland.
Okay, we just take one more. Yes, question here. I prefer political institutional questions because we have an economic session this afternoon. Poul?
Thank you for the television. A question maybe for you, Jean-Claude Piris. If you look at the possibilities for Brexit, the Brits say, if we talk to them and say, well, a Norwegian solution where as the agreement is not acceptable, if you look at the statistics, it's now, this year, it will be 20 years since the Norwegians voted no, and the Norwegian Parliament has adopted more than 9,000 pieces of EU legislation over that 20 years without influencing them. So they say, okay, they look more for a Swiss scenario, some kind of Swiss agreement. What would it look like if they really decide to leave? What kind of link do you foresee between Britain? What would be the legal way to keep them in some way? And what would be the price of it?
Well, I do think that in the future, the EEA formulation, which is Norway, Liechtenstein, and Iceland, is the shape of relations, because it gives more or less entire access to the internal market, except agriculture, fisheries, but more or less entire. But you are becoming a kind of satellite politically of the EU because you have to copy their laws. 9,000, you have to understand that this is including, it's a good figure, but it includes all the tiny measures, the mise à jour, up to date, things of procedures, so on and so on. There's not all of substance. And you have to add that also these 2-3 countries not only are becoming a satellite because they don't participate to the EU decision making, but also they pay to the budget of the EU, and the percentage of the budgetary charge for Norway is only 9% lighter than the UK per head participation to the EU budget. So you have to realize that also. For the Swiss, we have adopted on the 6th of May 2014 a mandate for renegotiating this. It's finished, the 120 agreements. The EU don't want to. It's too heavy, it's too difficult to manage. So they want basically a thing which looks like the EEA. Different, but looks like. With the Commission, with its 28 members, the Court of Justice with 28 members, acting for Switzerland. And Switzerland must accept that.
It's good to copy-paste the democracy with a small rebates. But anyway, I'll take one more question, and Poul just had a small comment. So if you want to... Yeah. Oh, yes.
But maybe one...
I actually had some.
Oh, just wait a minute. Yeah, you can get that.
Well,
Poul,
it's just the comment. I basically agree with Jean-Claude on the model, but I would mention that there is another model sort of floating around, which would mean that you would create a second layer of European integration where there would be some yet undefined greater influence on those who are in this second layer on internal market decisions. But of course not excluding that before going into discussion in that forum, there would be sort of a caucus between the EU member states. And this second layer of integration would also solve a problem which a number of member states are still struggling with, and that would be what to do about Turkey. So it would be a layer with Turkey, those who, UK, those who do not want the EEA countries, and those other EU member states that would find that a more attractive company.
But the beauty with the Swiss knife is that it has a lot of functionalities. You can open a bottle of wine, if you have something between your teeth, you can help that out. You know, it's good with the Swiss solution sometimes. Jean-Claude, I'll just give one question more here, and then you have the possibility to comment.
My name is Uffe Østergaard. It's actually not a question but a suggestion. You asked who is going to hide Denmark, or Denmark is going to hide behind. Why not think of Poland? We disagree in everything except the preeminence of the nation states. So I think they will be our helpers in the future.
Yes, final comments for all of you. Just small comment.
I totally agree, and we certainly need to take Poland much more serious. And we also have to think about what are the political reactions in Poland when we talk about Polish plumbers or strawberry pickers, the damage inflicted on a very, very important ally for Denmark are much greater than people realize when they just throw these comments out.
Marlene?
Yes, I actually don't agree with you about Poland. I think Poland really, really wants to be in the core of Europe. They just want to be, you know, have influence and be considered almost as big as Germany and France and Spain. So yes, they're going to make a lot of noise because Poles do that. But I don't think we'll get much help in terms of our skepticism. I think they're going to fight for themselves to get influence. Then just a small comment that I think we have not discussed, and I'm really a bit sorry about, because it was something Jean-Claude mentioned in his talk, and that was the idea that also the European Parliament will be influenced by two-speed Europe or three-speed Europe. I think it's really scary to think about it. I think it's pretty likely that it will happen. But just think about it. You know, several groups in the European Parliament, somebody who can vote.
This is the Eurozone Parliament, and this is
the Eurozone Parliament, and will it eventually end up with those institutions, or will it just informally? It doesn't really matter, because if you start having meetings only with those in the Eurozone, will you have a united Parliament anymore? And what about legitimacy? These are the issues that we have not touched, and I really think that legitimacy in relation to Eurozone, or in relation to two-speed Europe is incredibly important as well.
Jean-Claude, just a short remark.
Well, so I choose to answer to Paul. I have asked the floor at that moment. I disagree with Paul on the possible creation of yet another layer of member states which would not be in the European Union, but which would be influencing the decision making of the European Union in the internal market and participating in internal market. I don't think this will happen.
It's not my proposal.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Participating more.
Thank you very much. We have a live conversation going on here. We could go on for hours. I'm sure the audience could participate as well. We need to stretch our legs, just have a bit of coffee, a fruit, but you can maybe play a video while people are leaving the room. We'll have to be back here 15 minutes past 11, and please give a hand before the video.